Hello, everyone. As we are waiting for everyone to get signed in, you will see a poll up on your screen to see if you've attended any of our webinars before. If you could get that filled out as we wait, that'd be great. Now you can also, would be a great time to drop in the chat where you're calling in from today. As we wait, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Madison Burnett, and I'm a BCBA. I lead our professional development program, and I'll be available to support you throughout the webinar. In addition to that role, I work alongside other BCBAs on our clinician-led recruitment team, and I support in the effort of recruiting quality professionals to join our team. If you are interested in joining our team, please indicate so in the post-webinar survey at the end of this email. And then before we begin, I would like to tell you a little bit about our team. So we were established in 2011 and have continued to grow. Our team consisting of skilled adult and child psychologists, neuropsychologists, behavior analysts, special educators, licensed social workers, and behavior interventionists. As a team, we're committed to wraparound care, which includes our wide range of services from mental health and testing to ABA and educational services. This holistic approach allows us to address various needs and challenges with compassion and care. We provide services to clients out of our Upper West Side and Long Island City offices, in home, school, and clinic-based settings, as well as through telehealth. Our team is committed to serving individuals, couples, and families of all ages in diverse settings. We're also pleased to offer these free monthly webinars for parents and professionals where we will continue to learn and foster meaningful connections. Our vision at MPG is to create a future where individuals and their families feel supported, connected, and empowered. Our mission is to provide a multidisciplinary, integrated support for individuals and their families who experience mental health and behavioral and educational challenges. In an effort to stand by our mission and vision, we are thrilled to offer free 20-minute phone consultations with our clinical team. You can schedule a time by visiting the website, manhattanpsychologygroup.com, or follow the link that I'll be putting in the chat in just a moment. For today's webinar, we will be leaving the chat open, but please post any questions you have in the Q&A so we can make sure that Kimberly sees them. Any questions that are remaining, we'll be able to answer them at the end of the webinar. If we do run out of time, then we will be sending those to her directly for her to answer. And now I'm excited to introduce today's speaker, Kimberly Walker. Kimberly is the founder of Parenting Unlimited, is a highly regarded parent consultant specializing in teaching parents how to encourage and implement healthy sleep habits for their children and also in potty training. She's an expert in addressing a wide array of challenging sleep issues, including chronic night wakings, the needs of twins and multiples, toddler transitions, and managing siblings. She has been recognized in publications such as Time Out Baby New York, has worked at the renowned Soho Parenting Center as an independent sleep consultant, and has lectured to a variety of parenting groups regarding sleep challenges, potty training, and child behavior and development. For over 20 years, Kimberly has worked with hundreds of infants and children and developed tried and proven techniques to help them form and maintain healthy and predictable sleep habits. She received a master's in social work from Columbia University with a focus on children and family. She's a licensed master social worker in New York State and worked previously with adult and children as a clinical psychotherapist. Her extensive and unique background in psychology enables her to nurture both the child and the parent throughout this process of sleep teaching and other sensitive issues that affect children, parents, and families. And now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Kimberly.
Hi, everyone. I don't really need to introduce myself because Madison did it for me, but I just sort of wanted to start with, I'm looking at a couple of the chats. If you guys want to write in and tell me how old your children are and maybe like what your biggest challenge is, then I can try to answer that as we go. I want to make sure that everyone is aware that this specific talk is mostly for babies. Toddlers are a whole different ball game, and we may do something with toddlers later, but today it's mostly for babies. All right, I'm gonna go over here. I think you guys have some polls to answer about what would you prefer, those kinds of things. Let's see here. I'm kind of looking at your answers. Oh goodness, we're getting 50-50 for our talk. All right, I'm going to start with why is sleep important? I know most of you already know this because you're parents and you're exhausted, but the one thing I really want to tell you about babies is that the getting sleep for infants, and when this is more for, I'm talking, when I say infant, I'm going from like birth to 18 months. After 18 months, I start to work with calling them toddlers. Sleep is so important for these babies because it is actually the time that their brain grows the most. And so when I work with some people and they're telling me, oh, my newborn only slept an hour all day long, I'm cringing because not only is this parent exhausted, but it's really not what the baby needs physically. And the same thing for the middle of the night. If you're saying, I don't want to teach my baby to sleep, that's totally fine. But if you're saying, I'm not really interested in teaching my baby to sleep because uh, I don't want to do any kind of sleep training, I don't believe in it, or anything like that, it's really a physical necessity for your family that these babies sleep. So it's not just, oh, well, it would be great if we could just get them to sleep, but if we can't, it's fine. Physically, it's really not fine. I sort of tell people it's kind of like being in a car seat. Would you probably be okay? Yeah, because you're probably not going to get in an accident. But is it really ideal for your child? No, not at all. So, the best thing for your baby physically and their health needs are to get a certain amount of sleep. And I'm going to show you on the next slide what kind of sleep we're talking about. Total sleep for babies. That's something I'm not going to go over the whole slide, but it's something you guys can sort of look at. Um, Babies need a certain amount of sleep all in a 24-hour period to for their bodies to sort of grow and do what they're supposed to do. If you're looking at, let's say, a infant that needs 24 I mean, sorry, that needs like 14 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period, you do need to count naps into that. Now, one of the things about that is, let's say let's say someone calls me and they say, my child's only sleeping from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's 8 hours. Well, if you're taking a 4-hour nap, then yes, that's 12 or 4 hours total of naps. Then yes, that's 12 hours in the 24-hour period. But ideally, you really don't want a night to be less than 10 hours when you're talking from birth to 18 months. So I'm going to say that again. You really do not want a night to be less than 10 hours. So even if your total sleep is equaling what they need in a 24 hours, you want their nighttime sleep to be at least 10 hours. Now, a lot of people call me and they say, I'm sure everyone's heard of this, they want their baby to sleep 7 to 7. I don't know who came up with that, but it's a thing out there. And I want to tell you that thing is not necessarily for your baby. Not all babies will sleep 12 hours. And what I tell people is you want to aim for 10 and hope for 12. If you get 12, that's amazing. I say 10 is good enough, 11 is great, and 12 is perfect, and you don't have to have the perfect baby. So as long as they're getting at least a 10-hour night and they're averaging somewhere within this range here on this slide for total sleep time, then you're okay. But you don't want to have, an 8-hour night and 4 hours worth of naps because that's not what's best for them physically. Okay, so the next slide I want to talk about is the family bed controversy. I'm obviously a sleep consultant. I believe in sleep training, which I like to call sleep teaching because there's lots of things we have to teach our kids along the way, and sleep, unfortunately, is one of them. Even though, it's crazy that these babies are born and don't know how to sleep, it's just the truth. A lot of babies don't know how to sleep. There is a huge controversy out there about co sleeping versus sleep training. And I can only tell you as a parent and as a sleep consultant that, of course, I believe in teaching your child to sleep independently. However, that does not mean that I think it's horrible if someone is co sleeping. There are lots of cultures, and all they do is co sleep. There's no such thing as a child in their crib alone in another bedroom. And, I don't think those cultures are wrong. I just have to say that from a also safety standpoint, I have to say as a sleep consultant that the safest thing for your child is in a bassinet or a crib, either in your room or in another room. If everyone is sleeping and getting the rest they need, obviously it's not my house, so I'm not inherently opposed to co-sleeping if you're safe, your child's old enough, and everyone is sleeping. But it's really important to understand that from my perspective, how you sleep with your child, whether you sleep with your child or not, is a total personal preference. And the real telltale sign for me, if it's quote okay, is it working for your family? If your husband's on the floor and your child's feet are in your face all night, it might not be working for your family. If everyone is sleeping and peaceful and happy, then it's working for your family, and you have to choose what works for you. It doesn't mean that sleeping with your child is the absolutely worst thing in the world. Of course, everyone knows about safe sleep and SIDS and rolling on your baby and all of that. So you have to talk to your pediatrician, and you have to consider all of those things. And like I said, as a sleep consultant, I have to say that it's really, really important that you do what's the safest, not necessarily what is the easiest. Okay, so let me just check the questions for a second, see if anybody has any questions so far. I want to sort of get to things as I go. I see there's a couple people who have some older children. Yes, the answer is yes. This is really mostly about babies. And so if you have toddlers, then you can reach out to me personally and we can do a phone consult. And I'm gonna go ahead and say this now. I was going to do, a $50 off of my either one of my phone packages at the end, but if you have signed on to this thinking that this was for your school-age child or a toddler and it's not, then I'm still going to offer you that discount. If you need to reach out to me personally to work with your toddler, then please, by all means, do that. Does a dream feed count in the 10-hour night? Yes, the dream feed does count in a 10-hour night. So if your baby's sleeping, let's say you put them to bed 8 p.m. and starting their day at 6 a.m., but you're doing a 10, 11, 12 dream feed, yes, because they're still sleeping and that is part of their night. So yes, that does count. Also, how to count fairly restless naps in the total hours of sleeping. I'm guessing what you mean is one of the problems with naps that is a consistent problem with a lot of people is that babies will sleep 30 to 45 minutes and then wake up. If your baby's sleeping 30 minutes, wakes up, and you rock them back to sleep for another 30 minutes, then you count the hour of sleep, if that's answering your question. Okay, does anybody else have any questions so far? All right, I'm gonna move on to swaddling. Again, somewhat of a controversial topic, depending on who your pediatrician is. So I personally am a big believer in swaddling. I think it's super, super helpful for newborns, especially twins and premature babies, because they have a moro reflex, and that's what the startle reflex is called. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been to people's homes with really young babies, and they're up all night, and we put them in a swaddle, and they sleep better. Most of the time, if a baby still needs to be swaddled, meaning they have a very strong moro reflex, the startle reflex, and you try to teach them how to sleep, a lot of times the sleep training will fail because they're just not ready to not be in a swaddle. So there have been times that I've been to people who have tried to take their baby out of a swaddle and sleep train them, and it's a disaster. The baby cries and cries and cries. And then when we swaddle them again and teach them to sleep, it works. A lot of people are worried about using the swaddle for too long. Now, what does it mean to use it for too long? I personally don't believe you can use it too long, again, if it's working for your baby. If your baby starts to roll over, that's it, cut it out. Nothing you can do. You have to take it off. But there's no reason to say, okay, the minute my baby turns 12 weeks old, we're taking off the swaddle. I promise you, no one is going to go to college in their swaddle. We're going to be okay. We're going to get them out of the swaddle. And when they're physically ready to be out of it and not have the startle reflex anymore, then when you take it off, it's usually not a problem. So if you have an infant that let's say they are 3 months old, and your pediatrician says you need to get rid of the swaddle, and you take the swaddle off and it's a disaster and they're crying a lot and up a lot, and you notice that there's a big decline in their sleep after you took the swaddle off, put it back on and then try again in 2 weeks. When they're ready to not have it, when you try again, it won't be a disaster. So one thing to look out for to know whether they're ready to not have it is when you take it off, are they okay? And if they are, then you're good. If they're not, they need it a little bit longer. And you don't have to look at how old they are. You just have to watch behavior, with the exception of rolling, of course. If they're rolling, then that's not an option. Um, the other thing about the swaddle is when I say swaddle, I mean with their arms down by their side. If they're in the swaddle and their arms are here over their chest, then that can be not only frustrating for them, but it can also be dangerous because they get their little hand out the neck and then it can make the neck tight. And so that is not a safe position for them to be in. So if you are swaddling, or if you plan on swaddling, which I do recommend, um, make sure that the swaddle is tight enough that their arms are down by their side. The other thing about the swaddle is only use it for sleep. So if you have an infant, every time that it's time for them to go to sleep, change their diaper, put the swaddle on, and get them to sleep. And of course, always take it off when it's not sleep time, because that's when they need to move around and stretch their muscles and things like that. Okay, does anyone have any questions about swaddling? I don't see anything. So I'm going to move on. All right, I'm going to move on to the most common problems that lead, most common habits that lead to sleep problems. Most of the time when I work with people, they have one or two of these habits or both. Some people are double winners. So either their baby can only fall asleep with movement, which means they're either rocking, patting, strolling in the car, some sort of have people who bounce on the yoga balls, any kind of movement. And so their baby's constantly rocking or moving in order to fall asleep. So they have no idea how to fall asleep from a standstill, non movement place, which means if you put them in their crib and you say, "Good night, I love you," they're going to go ballistic because they don't know how to fall asleep. The other problem is what I call a sucking addiction. And that means they don't know how to fall asleep without the breast in their mouth, a bottle in their mouth, or a passy in their mouth. All of those are the same: breast, bottle, and passy. If your baby always falls asleep with one of those three things, generally speaking, they will develop a sucking addiction and they will have no idea how to fall asleep without sucking. I'm actually working with 3 babies right now. Um, let's see, one's 4.5 months, one is 5 months, and one like 6 months. All of them are in passy detox right now. They are learning how to fall asleep without the passy in their mouth. Now, the people that are double winners, those are the people that are rocking their baby to sleep with the passy in their mouth, or rocking with the bottle, or rocking while breastfeeding. So those babies can't fall asleep without movement and without the passy. Why is this a problem? This is a problem because as they get older and they start to wake up in the middle of the night, if you don't go play the ping pong passy game with them, they're not going to go back to sleep. Or you're getting up, if it's not the passy, it's the breasts, and you're getting up for them to suck for 5 minutes and then fall back asleep. So they're not getting up to eat, they're not getting up for the food. So somebody will say, well, my baby's 8 months old and wakes up all night for food. So what happens? Well, I get up and nurse them for 5 minutes and they go back to sleep. Or I get up and give them 2 ounces in a bottle and they go back to sleep. That is not an example of a hungry baby. That is an example of a baby who doesn't know how to fall asleep without sucking. So that is a super, super common thing. I would say, probably 70 or 80% of people who call me have the sucking problem. And the same thing, if it's a pacifier, then every time they wake up in the middle of the night, you're going in there and you're popping the passy back in their mouth and trying to get them to go back to sleep. If your baby is old enough to put the passy back in their mouth, then of course you can theoretically put 10 passies in their crib. And I'm not even exaggerating when I say 10 passies. And they can roll around the crib and pick it up themselves. But if your child is not old enough to put the pacifier back in their mouth, then it is very, very important that if you're going to teach them to sleep, you take the pacifier away. Babies learn through consistency. And if you give them the passy during the daytime, but take it away at night, it's not going to work because they're confused. They don't know time. They don't know, okay, starting at 7 a.m., I get that passy, but when it's 7 p.m. and I have to go to bed, I don't get it anymore. They don't know that, and so they're gonna continue to look for it. So all the 3 babies that I'm working with right now, the reason I say they're going through passy detox is because we said bye-bye passy, and they are learning to sleep without sucking. One of them is passy and nursing, and the other 2 are just passies. So when and if you are ready to teach your child to sleep, then ideally, um, not ideally, pretty much imperatively, it's important that you take the pacifier away. Um, and it's not that I'm a pacifier hater for newborns or anything like that. If you need them, then that's fine. The issue is that when it comes to sleeping and learning how to sleep independently, you need to take it away. The same thing with the breast or bottle. So, in a perfect world, from the very beginning, when you come home from the hospital, don't let them fall asleep with it in their mouth. You might want to use it while you are heating up the bottle, or let them get all cozy on your breast or with the bottle, but pull them off and take the bottle away before they get into a deep sleep. That would be ideal if possible. Um, any questions about rocking, sucking, those kinds of things, common habits that lead to sleep problems? Anybody? Okay, let's go to the next slide. I talked about these things a little bit, but things we want to pay attention to. Sure. Hold on one second. All right, things we want to pay attention to. The most important thing that you want to pay attention to are the awake intervals for your baby. So when someone says to me, I have a 2-month-old and he takes 1 nap a day, I promise you with everything in me that that child is very sleep deprived. So as you can see on this list, there are awake these, and these are average. Of course, you can have the exception where possibly your baby can stay awake a little bit longer than most babies their age, or they can stay awake a little bit shorter than most babies their age. But when I'm sending what you have on your slide right now that maybe you guys can, print out for the future, are awake intervals and average for their day. So the thing that's important to remember about awake intervals is they get longer as the day goes on. Usually, you add 30 minutes to each awake interval as the day progresses for the naps. For example, I'm just going to go with a 6-month-old because it's an even number. Most 6-month-olds take 2.5 naps a day, meaning 2 real naps and 1 half nap. So the half nap is like a little cat nap at the end of the day just to make it to bedtime. I would say between the ages of 6 and 8 months is usually when you're outgrowing that cat nap, but it all depends on what time your bedtime is and what time wake up is. Sometimes the cat nap at the end of the day, um, you know when you're ready to outgrow that, when you're running out of time for the cat nap. So if your bedtime is 7 p.m. and your baby's getting tired at 5:30, then that's when you want to work on your schedule and you can make your bedtime a little bit earlier and skip the cat nap. So for the awake intervals, for someone like a 6-month-old, from the time they wake up in the morning until their first nap is usually about 2 hours. So if your baby's up at 6 in the morning, then the first nap would start at 9. And if that nap is 45 minutes to an hour, so let's say they're up at 10, then if you know your baby's awake window in the morning is 2 hours, then the next awake window is 2.5 hours. So if their first nap is from 9 to 10, then their second nap would start at 12:30. I hope that makes sense. The same thing with, let's say, an 8-month-old. Let's say they're doing 2 hours and 45 minutes awake between morning wake up and nap one. Then you would add 30 minutes and they can do 3 hours and 15 minutes awake between nap one and nap two. So I hope that makes sense. Awake intervals can be tricky because you have to sort of figure out what works for your baby. You do not want them to get in a position that they're too overtired. But if you go to put them down for a nap and they're not tired enough, then you're going to fall into more problems because they need to be tired enough to take more than a cat nap. So one of the babies I was just working with, she was sleeping like 4 or 5 times a day for 30 minutes each time. So she'd sleep 30 minutes, they'd keep her up an hour and a half, and she'd sleep another 30 minutes, stay up an hour and a half, sleep another 30 minutes. She really was tired after an hour and a half because she was only sleeping 30 minutes. However, she also was only sleeping 30 minutes because she was only up an hour and a half. So you can get into a vicious cycle of putting them down when they're tired, but not tired enough. And then what they're doing is what I call snack napping. They're taking little snack naps all day, cat naps, but not a really long restorative nap. So, one of the ways that you can fix that is to look at the awake intervals on the slide and make sure that you are keeping your baby up for the appropriate amount of time, even if for that first window they're going to be really exhausted because they only slept 30 minutes, but you still need to keep them up for the amount of time their body should be able to stay awake in order for them to be tired enough to take a real nap. Okay, I hope that all makes sense. Another thing that you want to look out for is feeding and snacking. So, feeding and snacking are sort of the same thing as cat napping. A lot of people will feed their baby, well, 2 things that I see mostly. They feed their baby when they're not really hungry. They feed them when they're tired because they're using the breast or the bottle to get them to sleep, and they're not using it as a feed, but they don't know that they're not using it as a feed. They think that the baby's hungry. Baby's not really hungry, they just need to suck to go to sleep. And the other thing is just feeding them too often so that they're not taking real meals. So, example, if you have a 6-month-old, they can, if they're on bottles, they can go every 4 hours without food. So, if you're feeding your 6-month-old every 2 hours, 3 ounces, then it's like they're snacking all day, and that can really, mess up any sort of consistency or schedule for them to learn how to take a real meal and not just snack all through the daytime. Now, along with using the bottle or the breast to get your baby to sleep, a lot of people also will just use the bottle and breast because when the baby cries, they think something's wrong. And they think, "Oh, he's crying, he must be hungry." They're not necessarily hungry. They may just need some sort of comfort, or they may need a diaper. I mean, who knows? They may need 100 things. They also may just be a tiny little baby and just crying. So, one of the things that I really see a lot is people feeding their babies when they're not hungry. Um, and it creates a habit of them snacking all through the day, not learning how to eat full meals, and not learning how to be comforted at all without milk or the breast or some sort of sucking mechanism. So those are things that I think are really, really important to look out for when you bring a baby home or are home with a 6-month-old, 8-month-old, 1-year-old, whatever it is, this baby ate 2 hours ago. Are they really, is my 1-year-old really hungry? He just had lunch. Or is he just cranky because he's a 1-year-old? So those things are really important to look out for when you're thinking about habits and things like that. Um, okay, does anybody have any questions about awake intervals, feedings, and things like that? We're going to go over schedules, but does anybody have any questions about awake intervals, feedings, anything like that? Just going to go through here. Don't see anything yet. I am gonna leave questions at the end. I mean, I'm gonna leave time at the end for just any random questions at all you have for me about behavior, about anything. Okay, let's go for things to work towards. There are people who believe that babies don't need a schedule. I am not one of them. There are people who feel like putting your baby on a schedule is too regimented and makes your life too structured. For me personally as a parent, and for most parents that I work with, when we do end up on a schedule, it actually does the opposite of what you think is going to happen. It actually frees up your life instead of making it feel more regimented. For example, if you know that your baby's feeds are 7, 11, 3, and 7, then you know whether, if you're running to Target, whether you need to take a bottle with you. If you're going to Target at 9 in the morning and you're gonna be back by their feed, you don't need to take a bottle. If you have no idea when your baby eats or when your baby sleeps, then your day can be really chaotic because you never know what to expect of them or what their needs are. So I personally think the schedule is very important because it helps you to be able to live your life. Let's say you want to make a phone call. If you know, oh, my baby usually naps between 9:30 and 10, then you can make a phone call. If it's all over the place, you have no idea when you can do anything at all, schedule anything, leave the house, nothing. Even leaving the house with naps. I'm also not that person who says, "Okay, now that you're on a schedule, you have to be home for every nap and every feed." Absolutely not. But you can be aware of, for example, my one of my children, he naps around 2, somewhere between 1:30 and 2 o'clock. So we went out yesterday all morning and I made sure we left where we were going about 1:30 so that I knew he would sleep all the way home. And he did because that's his schedule. So it's so easy versus me having no idea when he was going to sleep and no idea when I should leave where we were or anything like that. It just makes life so much easier to know when they need to eat and when they need to sleep. And I think it's so much easier for them and it helps them to sleep better at night when their daytime sleep and feeds are predictable. Um, I mentioned this just a little bit about things to work towards even when you come home from the hospital. And if you can't do it when you come home from the hospital, you can do it 4 weeks later. The hardest habit to break is the sucking to sleep. So one of the things to really work towards is putting your baby down wide awake and letting them learn how to close their eyes and put themselves to sleep without a passy breast or bottle. And if one of the ways for you to get there is to even rock them or pat them, if you know you need to break a sucking addiction, then doing that in place of the passy or the breast or the bottle is a transition step into getting them to fall asleep completely by themselves. So it's easier to get rid of movement than it is to get rid of the sucking. So if you need to replace the sucking for a very temporary amount of time with movement, rocking, patting, whatever, stroller, whatever it is to get them used to falling asleep without sucking, then that's one of the ways that you can do that. I also, in your very next slide, you're going to see, in this slide, you're going to see a sample 6-month-old schedule. Now, again, this is just a sample. Everybody's, baby is different, but it gives you sort of an idea of what I do when I work with people. I make these schedules based on your life. If you tell me I need my baby in bed at 6:30, or my husband doesn't get home till 8 o'clock every night, I want a 9 o'clock bedtime, we can do that. We can make schedules to work with your life. And my goal is to work with your life and to get you and your family the sleep they need. Now, if you tell me I need to put my baby down at 10 o'clock, but he needs to be up at 6 o'clock, I'm going to say, well, even if that really worked for your life, it's really not enough sleep for your baby. And we'll talk about it and see what we can do to make it work. But here's an example of a 6-month-old schedule. You'll see this 6-month-old is only on bottles. I do nursing schedules all the time. I know that lactation consultants will tell you that you should always feed on demand. Some of my clients are perfectly fine with that, and that's what they do. And some say, I work from home. I have to know when I'm going to feed them so that I know when I can make phone calls for work and when my nanny can bring them to me to eat. So my goal is to do what works for your life and to get everybody sleep that they need. All right, let's see. Does anybody have any questions on sleep schedules or anything like that? Okay, I've got one question. It says, how strict should the schedule be and how soon should you start a strict schedule? Baby's 2 months old and is a little bit predictable, but you go with the flow. Definitely by 4 months, you can be on a pretty strict schedule. And by strict, I usually mean within a half hour. So they go down for nap between 9:30 and 10. They go to bed between 7 and 7:30. I usually give like a half hour window. And the same for feeds. Like, a feed would be between 10:30 and 11 a.m., between 2:30 and 3 p.m., somewhere within a half window. Um, can you start a schedule right now for your 2-month-old? It would be early, I think, to start a schedule, but not to start a sleeping schedule. It is not too early to start an eating schedule. Both of my children went on an eating schedule in the hospital. Now remember, I'm the sleep police over here, so I'm not saying that's normal. I'm just saying that it is possible to do. I knew before they were even born what schedule I needed them to be on that worked for my life or what I wanted them to be on, whichever. Once I had my second one, I knew what needed to happen based on my first one's schedule. So I did that in the hospital with them. A sleeping schedule is much harder to do with a 2-month-old because they're still like barely becoming alive to the world, but you can definitely put them on a feeding schedule within, about a half hour window. Did that answer your question? Thumbs up. Okay, great. All right, next. How to teach your baby to sleep. I've gone over this just a little bit, but I'm gonna try to be a little more clear about it. Hold on, I lost something. Oh, forgot to also mention that I have here a bedtime and a nap routine. One of the things that I think is really important is that your baby has a sleep routine, not nap or bedtime. So I do bedtime and nap routine exactly the same, except sometimes naps will not include a feed, and bedtime usually includes a feed. But besides that, your sleep routine should be exactly the same. The other thing that I really believe in and I think is important is we always read a book for our sleep routine. And when they're little, that book is always the exact same book every night. So something short. Everybody knows Goodnight Moon. Brown Bear, I found is a very good sleep book to use because the colors are vibrant and you can kind of say goodnight to the animals as you go. They can learn the colors as they get older. The reason I use a book is because it separates sucking and feeding from going in the crib. So there's something in it's not just, okay, I suck, get super drowsy and lethargic, and then I go straight in the crib. There's something between that, and they will learn that every single time they go in the crib, they see that book. So when they see that book, they know the next thing that happens is they go in the crib. One of the main reasons I love this part of the routine is because no matter where you go, if you go to an Airbnb or you go to your parents or you're at a hotel, it is the one part of the routine that is always consistent. And so they will learn that that book means sleep. So you never use it at any other points during the day. It's just their sleep book. Um, that you see on my sleep and bedtime routine. I also have white noise. Totally up to you. There's also some controversial articles and things about white noise. I think the main thing is, don't put it super loud and don't put it right on your child's ear. If you have a dog, if you have a toddler, and you're trying to get your infant to sleep, I highly suggest white noise. But again, that's a personal opinion. You do not have to have white noise in order to have good sleep in your house, but I don't see anything wrong with it. So people ask me about white noise a lot. All right, so teaching your babies to sleep, as everyone knows, there's tons and tons of methods out there. A lot of people will say, I don't believe in cry it out. I want to be clear here that true cry it out sleep training means that you put your baby down to sleep at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., whatever the time is, and you don't go back until the next morning. That is not what I do. That is not what I suggest. However, it is almost impossible to teach your baby to sleep without some crying because if they're frustrated and they're tired, they're going to cry. And if you pick them up, rock them, and give them the passy in order to stop that crying, then they're not going to learn how to sleep. So it's almost impossible to teach your baby how to sleep without crying. I can even have someone who we're doing, let's say, a baby step between passy detox and going in the crib. And they say, okay, Friday night, last night of the passy, we're not going to give them the passy ever again. And they rock them to sleep, and the baby's crying in their arms because they want a passy. So, whatever habit you're trying to break, your baby's not going to be happy about it. And there's no amount of baby steps that are going to make them happy about breaking a habit. So, um, you have to know that if you're have an older baby or even a 4-month old and they don't have any independent sleep skills and you want them to learn independent sleep skills, more than likely there's going to be some tears. That does not mean that you have to abandon your baby and leave them in a crib for 10 or 12 hours. I don't think you should do that. There can be a lot of checks, there can be a lot of hugs and kisses, all kinds of things, but you can't help them go to sleep, because if you always help them go to sleep, they're not going to learn how to sleep. So, if you work with me, then of course I go through all the very, very specific details of my method and what I do. But know that if you read a book or you see the no cry sleep solution, very, very, if it's too good to be true, again, probably is. There's not a lot of no cry sleep solutions. Um, the key mistakes I've spoke about, the main, there's two key mistakes that I see when you're trying to teach your baby to sleep. One of them is keeping the pacifier, and the other one is this term that people use called drowsy but awake. You do not want to put your child in the crib drowsy. You want to put your child in the crib awake, just like an adult. I don't get in my bed half asleep. I mean, some nights we do get in our bed half asleep because we're so exhausted, but you get in your bed wide awake, you know how to close your eyes and go to sleep. People have interpreted this word drowsy to mean the baby's like half asleep, but not all the way asleep. And that's a bad idea, because then when they wake up at 1 in the morning, there's nobody there to get them drowsy. So the main thing is they have to go in the crib wide awake, not drowsy, and no pacifier. Um, the last slide that I wanted to go over is, tolerating your emotions when you're when you're teaching your baby how to sleep. It is very emotional. I have someone I'm working with right now. The dad is taking care of everything, and the mom, they're in Virginia, and the mom walks across the street to the neighbors because, she says when she hears her baby cry, like something just rips inside of her and she just can't do it. And she feels like she's abandoning the baby by going to the neighbors, and I tried to explain to her what she's really doing is not abandoning the baby, because you have a goal here. The goal is for your family and your child to get the most sleep possible. And if that means being successful, means mommy goes to the neighbors, then that's doing what's best for your child. Some people, I think, feel guilty when they have me come in and do it, because I do in home services. But again, the whatever you need to do to reach your goal is what is best for your baby. So I know it's hard and it can be really emotionally triggering for a lot of people, because the babies might cry or not like these new habits. But as long as you understand that you're doing this for the baby, not to the baby, then hopefully it helps you sort of get through your emotions. And I do, along with sleep consulting and potty training, I do counseling and Zoom sessions with not just new moms, but just moms in general. And we work on all these emotions. It doesn't have to be around sleep training. It can be around just being a new mother and overwhelmed and all those kinds of things. So you can always contact me for that. We have, maybe like 5 minutes left. If somebody has any questions at all, please please let me like send a chat. You can contact me after this. I think Madison mentioned that you can always contact me later, or contact them if you have any follow-up questions. And like I said, I'm offering a $50 off of any of my phone consults if you were on this webinar, and $100 off of an overnight package if you need extra help. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, Madison, thank you guys so much for joining. And like I said, questions or anything like that, you can go on my website. My phone number is there. You can text me anytime, email me, whatever works for you.
Yeah, and if you guys think of any questions after the webinar ends, just feel free to reach out either directly to Kimberly, or if you go onto our webpage, we can be sure to connect you on with her as well. Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. If we do get additional questions, we will be posting some of her responses on our social media platforms. On the next page, you'll see a QR code, or I'm sorry, on the next slide, you will see some QR codes linking to our social media platforms. So that's where her responses would go. But if you, again, if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. So thank you again, Kimberly. This is the conclusion of today's presentation, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.